All right, everyone, there's such a tidal wave of material related to it's no longer really the Minneapolis protest. It's the nationwide George Floyd, or you could call them DNC riots at this point. I honestly don't know where to begin. At some point, it's such a confused mess of bullshit that it's even a little bit hard to properly analyze it. But you see, like on Twitter right now, George Floyd protests is trending worldwide, I believe. This is a misnomer, though. At this point, the actions that are taking place, not just in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but Atlanta and other places. Number one, they're not protests, they're riots. They're groups of looting thugs who are attacking local businesses and looking for an excuse to expend all that energy stored up during the lockdowns. And by the way, literally yesterday, I proclaimed that it was likely that these protests and riots would spread. And it's a powder keg situation. And again, I'm not surprised. And I can understand people's pissed off attitude, although I think it's far more than just George Floyd at this point. It's a boiling over of anger at multiple things. Part of it's political, part of it is racial sentiment, and part of it's police brutality. And I would say, again, the lockdowns are a big component in increasing the frustration. And number two, so first, they're not protests. Largely, these are riots. There are protests going on, and that's fine. That's legal and above board and helpful, actually. Most of it, though, at this point, is people throwing rocks and burning buildings. Not protests, and it has nothing to do with George Floyd, almost. Atlanta. What the fuck does Atlanta have to do with George Floyd? Totally different police force, and people are going to yell at the police down there as though they were somehow personally involved in what happened 1,000 miles away or some shit in Minneapolis. Well, that's just not the way that it is. It's not reality. And at this point, these rioters are being protected in part by the legacy media and by the Democratic Party, the DNC and so forth. You see, for example, all of the left-wing politicians using this as an opportunity to proclaim that Trump is racist for suggesting people shouldn't be allowed to burn down their own city and that he might have to send troops in order to quell unrest. If this happened under Obama, and indeed it did, and similar things are said, Obama literally calling people who were burning their own cities at the time thugs as well, I don't recall him being called racist despite the similarity of the situation. A callous neglect for human life, shown by a police force in a negligent manner. Now, of course, this goes, I think, beyond negligence, but you understand. And people protesting, but then there were always an offshoot of people that weren't interested in addressing any civic grievance. They weren't interested in the actual death that was the cause of the protest. They were just interested in running wild and putting bricks through windows. A lot of the property damage that's been done now has been done to small business owners and personal homes and vehicles and so forth. That has nothing to do with my mega corporations. Oh, McDonald's can just get insurance money. They don't care. Yes, I'm sure that the looters are so cerebral. They're so well organized. They're so intelligent because everyone knows that people who go out at 2 a.m. to throw rocks at cop cars are very intelligent people. I am sure that they conscientiously try to avoid doing damage to their locally owned businesses. I'm sure they're not going to loot them. Those won't get damaged or destroyed. Well, that's not the way that it works. Most of the businesses, I think, at this point that have been destroyed are small businesses. Once the Walmart's gone, the Target's gone, AutoZone and so forth, what's left? Well, they're still angry. The cops are still withdrawn to the sidelines. What the fuck are they going to do? They're going to attack the local businesses too. And I'm sickened even more by the legacy media like CNN. Live reporting as its own headquarters in Atlanta are attacked and vandalized. Still calling these protests. This is not a protest. The right of people to lawfully assemble in a peaceable manner, that's a protest. That's fine. I seem to recall groups on the left trying to call out the people that were very peaceably assembled, just standing there, happening to be armed with the Gadsden flags, and that's scary to us. They were called domestic terrorists and terrible people and bigots and extremists for literally standing there at the state capitol in Michigan to protest the lockdowns. And of course, another thing the left said was, they're not social distancing. Oh my God, they deny science. Dude, do you think that the rioters here are social distancing? Even the protesters aren't. They're not social distancing at these protests. They're just massing together now. It could be a peaceful protest. That's perfectly fine. And by the way, I don't care if they socially distance because it's fucking useless at this point. But the rioters definitely aren't. They're not following the law either. They're torching things, and there are going to be deaths probably associated with this. At some point, people are going to defend themselves. They're not going to wait for the state to give them permission, because it's clearly not going to happen. They're going to begin ignoring their state, because their state's ignoring them. If I'm paying tax money into my city, and my police force is not defending my property, I'll fucking do it myself. And then if they have a problem with that, I'll fucking sue them afterwards. That's unfortunately another effect of this. There's going to be protracted lawsuits over everything related to these fucking riots, and the legacy media is still calling them protesters. Oh, here we see a group of protesters angry at George Floyd's death, and it's a group of people, they're looting a Target. They're not interested in George Floyd. They don't give a fuck about him. They don't even know who the dude is. None of them ever met him. Half of them don't even know the full story. They're not keeping up with the news tips, and so that they can be aware and conscientious about their actions. Dude, the cop at the center of the controversy has been booked now on third-degree murder charges, and the riots are still going on. Wow, it's almost like George Floyd and getting justice for him, having been wrongfully killed by these cops, isn't the actual impetus for rioting. No, these people just want to run amok because they're lawless thugs. That's just the way that it is. I'm sure this will probably be the main crux of the conversation when I talk later with Ramsey Paul on Happy Homelands too. And I see leftists too. Like, I'll be making another video about the amazing atheist and his comments towards me, actually, because it's like, come on, dude. At some point, just being ridiculous. I see people on the left, and they're like, insinuating that if you don't support this behavior, that there's something wrong with you. Well, it's just Walmart and McDonald's. Nobody cares. You're a bootlicker because, you are more angry at the fact that hundreds of businesses are burning and people being assaulted and driven off of their property all across a fucking major city. Yes, I think that's more important than one death. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that many hundreds of millions of dollars in damage to small businesses, lives ruined, and thousands of people dispossessed of their jobs is more important than one person. Unpopular opinion, I guess, among some of the more extreme echo chamber elements of Twitter. But I don't really care because it's not reality. The average American looking at this situation, all they see is a bunch of violent thugs. That's what they're seeing on TV. Look, if you've got a crowd of people peaceably protesting and a crowd of people burning things, which one does Soccer Mom America see? Which becomes the face of the protests, and the legacy media literally labeling them such? The people burning stuff. That's now the face of these, it's just like Ferguson. That's now the face of the protests, and what'll happen is that America, initially mainly angry at the police in this situation, will turn against the rioters. And unfortunately, the peaceful protesters will essentially be all but forgotten in that situation. Hey, Kat, you can sing later. We'll make a recording. We'll make an album. Anyway, yeah. So it sort of distracts me a little bit there. That happens all day. Less distracting than having to see, literally, we go from nonstop COVID coverage now to nonstop Minneapolis to the point where nobody even gives a shit if they get sick. It's funny to see those, again, same leftists cheering people on who are clearly not social distancing. I thought you wanted grandma to die if you were gathering in groups of more than 10 people right now. You hate science and you want grandma to die. Well, why don't you aim that criticism at these people? Is it because of the color of their skin that you don't do that? Oh, yes, I believe that it is. That's about all. Peace out.